Now, our final speaker today is John Andrews, Managing Director of IMRG. That's the UK's Industries Association for e-retail. IMRG aims to maximise the commercial potential of online shopping, and John is responsible for the management and technical development of the business. John's going to offer some thoughts on the trends affecting the industry and the global issues that need to be addressed as online retail continues to grow. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Andrews.
Good afternoon. Thank you, UKTI. Thank you, Michael. IMRG, Interactive Media and Retail Group, was formed about the same time that Tim Berners-Lee was developing www. And the visionary founder of IMRG, who's lent me IMRG today, is in the audience, James Roper, who was the visionary that set up IMRG and is indeed still very active in the business today. And it really was at a time, I think, that e-commerce was viewed as a potential for the future in the early 90s, along with the growth of the internet generally. But it was very much a case of hurry up and wait. Well, maybe the wait is over now, and maybe e-commerce is here and a permanent part of the business, part of the industry, part of retailing, and perhaps we can almost drop the E. What I'd like to cover today, because I'm so thank the previous speakers for some tremendous presentations. Really so darn good that I probably should leave the stage now and have nothing left to say, because it was a tremendous presentation. But it's just an indication, I think, of the energy and how fast e-commerce has grown. IMRG has over 1,200 members of the trade association, ranging from large retailers, large manufacturers, large brands, logistics companies, payments companies, predominantly in the UK, but now increasingly extending globally in its activities and its reach. We've looked at, really, we're going to look at a perspective here today from a different perspective. That is, which we've been hearing all through today, about the global consumer. We'd like to look from the other end of the telescope, because we feel that's really what's driving this major change in retailing. So if we look at, and we've heard many quotes, and I'm not going to repeat what we've seen. This is IMRG's own view. We have our own relational database. We map activities of 200 countries around the world on e-commerce. And again, has been reiterated, UK really is emerging at the forefront of global e-commerce. And that can be, as we've seen from previous speakers, if we look now, Europe as an entity for e-commerce has just surpassed North America, USA and Canada, in terms of the volume of e-commerce, and that trend looks set to continue. And if we draw down further into Europe, we can see again this reinforcement that the UK has doubled its sort of activities compared to, say, France and Germany and the other countries that make up Europe. So that's really where we position the UK in its growth and its expertise now that's developed as a world leader, as Vince Cable was saying this morning. And indeed, some of the earlier speakers were referring to, in fact, the skills base that's now developed in the UK on many, many different facets that are involved in e-commerce. So, from that, if we look at the headlines, if you like, of e-commerce, it's now a £70 billion market in the UK. Already, and it's quite interesting, it's becoming quite a significant employer in the UK. From our surveys, we find there's approaching 1 million people now in the UK involved in some way in the e-commerce industry. It may be pure online retailing, it may be logistics, it may be customer service, contact centres, etc. But that's quite a significant dimension. 250,000 small retailers, we're estimating now, in the UK are involved in online retailing. And very much so, playing to something that the government, I know, is very keen on, about export-led growth. Well, we're actually seeing, and it's reinforced by Nick and others, that because of the relative ease of exporting, trading globally, without all the heavyweight infrastructure that you have to set up as stores and goodness knows what, you can do it very, very quickly. Once you're on the internet, you are a global company. Whether you want to service that or not is another matter, but certainly it's there. Behind that, IMRG, and it's now working with the European Multi-Channel Online Traders Association, setting up common trust marks that can be used across borders, etc. So there is trust across borders for trading across borders. Certainly in the UK, IMRG has run a trust scheme for about 10 years. That's now merged with a European operation called Trusted Shops, and we're now in active dialogue with the European Commission and the UK government about extending a common trust mark for cross-border trading in that respect. But beyond that, you know, what are the challenges? Well, some interesting things beginning to emerge here now. Areas like it, particularly as you're going across borders, in the past, territorial pricing, often controlled by the manufacturer on the brand. Why is it $1,000, £1,000 and €1,000 for the same product? Well, the consumer now knows that and is challenging that and saying, why? You know, so this perhaps is now beginning to come under threat, the transparency of this, and again, the wider, educated, informed consumer, and a move to global pricing. That will clearly cause some upheaval, some influences. Distribution agreements will be perhaps need to be revisited. We talk much about cross-border, but in fact, again, if we look through the consumer's eye within this, it's essentially borderless. You know, borders almost don't exist. The internet doesn't understand things like physical borders, political regimes, etc. We've seen the upheavals in other areas of society. But that's a fact, and in the consumer's eye, particularly as we're seeing now digital downloads, if you think how much is now being downloaded, whether it's music, video, books, etc., can be downloaded, the consumer really has no knowledge necessarily where the server is, and probably isn't very bothered either, as long as they get their product instantly. So the whole fundamental changes here about international trade. And coming behind this, as we've seen, and Nick again has made reference to it, about brands, we're beginning to see from activities through our trade association where brands are beginning to wake up and say, why do we need a retailer? Can't we trade direct? We've got the infrastructure, we make the products, we want to hear what the consumers say, we want the feedback from the consumers, we want that knowledge, and by the way, we control the product and the price. So kind of interesting mixtures going in here. Who would have said, you know, that one of the top online retailers is Apple, the manufacturer, the brand. It's a fact. So, you know, we see very much this global picture rapidly emerging now. After all, if you look at the scale, the potential there, every citizen on the planet is, of course, a consumer. So there's plenty of market to go at the moment. If we look at e-commerce, though, I think it's important to recognize, as I'm sure we do, it's part of a much bigger evolution, where consumers, businesses, government, academia, society, everything is migrating from the old infrastructures, road, rail, post, train, air, to the internet, where it's a high speed, low energy, it's free, effectively free for most people in many ways, or almost free, borderless, and it's always on, 24/7, 365 or 366 on a leap year. So what we're seeing is this, that retailing now is following the consumer. It's not the retailers that have gone multi-channel. It's, you know, it's often quoted now. It's the consumer that has gone multi-channel. The consumer driving this, using technology and the rapidly growing and rapidly low-cost technology to this complete global online society. So really, retail is just part of that. It's this social shift to doing things online instantly around the globe. So that's where we see sort of e-commerce. But I'm going to take a little step here now, because it was indicated that perhaps it would be useful as well, given the strength of the other speakers and the data that we got, not to repeat things, just to take a little peek at perhaps we think could be yet another phase, and in fact something that some people are beginning to call the next industrial revolution, which are what are known as 3D printers. Printers where you can digitally download a design and manufacture that in a small printer. We see some examples here of printers which can make things. And those printers can be either in a store or equally in a home. So you can actually take a design, download it, and manufacture it in your own home. And we see different examples of these printers, which are now running at about £2,000, £1,500, getting down to that price without any economies of scale. And we see different types of products, etc., can be produced. Even a certain American gentleman in the top right corner, some of you will be familiar with, downloaded a spare part for his 1907 Duesenberg car, where it's no longer available, of course, that particular model. But he could make a spare part. So what are we saying about 3D printing? It's here. It's a license, almost, to print and manufacture and design pretty well anything, anywhere, anytime. It can be shoes, it can be dresses, it can be lampshades, it can be chocolate. Food is now coming. There is even a steak that you can now download, a guitar, a table. Early days, of course, it's early days, but it is here. And rather like the internet, if you think, when is this going to happen? Well, think about the internet. If you ask anybody about the internet 20 years ago, they've never heard of it. So what we think we're beginning to see here is, if we look back at the first industrial revolution, it's almost fast forward or back to the future. Because you look at the move from the local design, production, and distribution, it was done in the home. People spinning, making their own things. Then along came the Industrial Revolution. We moved to centralized design, centralized production, centralized distribution. Along came retailers, for the first time. But in fact, what looks like may happen in the future is, in fact, that we're going to move to a situation with 3D printers of remote design. The individual can design their own product. The individual can do their own production. It's digital, instant digital distribution. Guess what? There's no stock. There's no costs involved until the unit's actually sold, until you've made it and downloaded it. And for once now, the production of a single unit becomes economic, rather than mass quantities of stock which people may or may not want. We're talking about all the issues about surplus stock, etc., and you can't sell because it's out of season. No physical transportation, gone. No packaging, gone. And you can even recycle the raw materials. If you don't like the product, there's a new design, what you do, you put the materials back in the printer and have a new design downloaded instantly to your home printer or in the store. So what we're really saying is that it's really the ultimate in global e-commerce, where people in today's society, I want it now, and I want my own. Of course, it's a long time away. People say, well, what are the timescales of this? It's here now. It's happening. It's happening in manufacturing for rapid prototyping. It's happening in car dealerships, download spare parts, etc., going to a central point in that sense. But clearly, it's coming. It's there. It's happening in consumers' homes. And whilst for sort of quasi-political environment, there is a temptation to say that, well, is this actually the big bazooka, or the next big bazooka? Or to misquote Al Gore, is this actually going to be an inconvenient truth? Because if you think a little bit about where this could go, about manufacturing, retailing, and back to the consumer, controlling this, designing this, the consumer empowerment through this technology. But when's it going to happen? But I say, take the example of the internet. 20 years ago, it didn't exist. Look where it is now, and the disruption it's caused. And if you think this thing's run out of steam, I would suggest, perhaps, as the V&A did very recently, had an exhibition about digital printer and design, etc. I think this is something to watch, and again, appeals instantly to the global consumer. So what we're really seeing, I think, is for the future of retailing, is that it's driven by the technology-enabled global consumer. I think there's little doubt of that. We're seeing it in everyday life, because it's not just about retailing. People are using technology for all kinds of things. So if we look at maybe all these ideas that we looked at about, well, what's the future of retailing? There's T-commerce, and there's M-commerce, and there's virtual commerce, and there's e-commerce, and there's multi-channel, and there's omni. Maybe from the consumer's perspective, it's just retailing. But I think and we've included in that, it's quite interesting, I was hearing a furniture retailer, an online furniture retailer in Florida who were just opening to look at the store-based top item there, where they were just opening their first physical website, which was quite an interesting turn on how they view a physical store as a physical website. So maybe that's a change in the balance of things in that respect. But that's the view of what we see coming. That is at least something, hopefully, that the previous speakers hadn't yet covered. I'm sure they'll be there. I know Nick will, whatever, and Tony will be. But I think, what can we say out of this? Or that there's a tremendous future here in this. A lot is going to change. The technology will continue to change it, and on a global basis. But there's nothing but opportunity. And I think it fits very well with the theme of this conference. We've been talking to UKTI for about a year now, and we're seeing these explosive technologies coming through. And we think that's a great combination for us to work with UKTI on this global expansion of UK-based or sourced technology and skills in retailing. So thank you for your time, and thank you for your interest.